In 1943, while American troops stormed beaches in Europe and the Pacific, another war was unfolding quietly in Bengal, India. Millions of civilians were starving, their bodies collapsing in markets and train stations. Known as the Bengal famine, it killed an estimated 3 million people in less than a year. Unlike Pearl Harbor or D-Day, this story never made it into most U.S. history books. Yet decisions made in London and Washington shaped its course. Food was available globally, but not for Bengal. Ships sailed full of American wheat toward Europe, while in Calcutta, children too weak to cry lay abandoned on sidewalks. The famine was not inevitable. It was political, strategic, and largely ignored. For Americans today, it's a shocking reminder of how the choices of distant governments can decide who eats and who dies. India was Britain's jewel in the crown, feeding the empire's war machine. Bengal's rice, jute, and manpower supplied soldiers from Africa to Burma. Yet when crop disease, cyclone damage, and wartime inflation struck, Bengal had no reserves. British authorities implemented a boat denial policy, confiscating fishing and transport vessels to block a feared Japanese invasion. This crippled food distribution. Rice rotted in some districts, while others starved. Meanwhile, prices doubled and tripled beyond a laborer's reach. Families sold land, jewelry, even cooking pots for handfuls of grain. When nothing was left, hunger turned to death. For ordinary Americans at the time, these horrors were invisible. Newspapers carried more headlines about General Patton than starving villagers. But for millions in Bengal, Allied war policy, made half a world away, was the difference between life and death. America was then the world's breadbasket, shipping vast grain supplies through its Lend-Lease program. Wheat and corn flowed to Britain, the Soviet Union, and Allied armies. Yet Bengal received nothing. Requests for U.S. grain shipments were denied, partly to prioritize European theaters. Churchill's government argued shipping space was too precious, and Washington did not press the issue. Historians note that U.S. stockpiles swelled, while Calcutta's streets filled with corpses. American officials knew famine reports existed. Journalists and missionaries cabled evidence home. But wartime politics and alliance with Britain muted responses. To Americans today, this silence feels jarring. In a war fought to free the world from tyranny, millions of civilians in a friendly Allied territory died of hunger. It was not a lack of food, but a lack of political will that made the Bengal famine one of the century's worst tragedies. Eyewitnesses described haunting scenes. In Calcutta, tram ratters stepped over bodies as casually as litter. Mothers, too weak to walk, placed their children near temples, praying someone might feed them. By morning, many were dead. A British civil servant recorded 3 or 4 corpses before reaching the office. It is routine now. American correspondents passing through were stunned. Ralph Ingersoll wrote, "Children are too weak to brush away flies from their eyes." Yet in U.S. headlines, famine news was buried beneath war coverage. Soldiers storming Sicily mattered more than civilians starving in Bengal. For American readers, these accounts, if they appeared at all, were background noise in a world consumed by tanks, bombs, and victories. The result? A humanitarian catastrophe slipped almost unseen past the very nation that prided itself on being the arsenal of democracy. Why has the Bengal famine remained so forgotten? Partly because those who died left few voices. Unlike Ireland's famine, which sent immigrants to America carrying memories, Bengal's dead remained where they fell. There were no monuments, no songs, no communities abroad to demand remembrance. Churchill dismissed the tragedy, blaming Indians for breeding like rabbits. American policymakers, consumed by winning the war, looked away. For decades afterward, the famine was overshadowed by Hiroshima, Normandy, and the Holocaust. Yet its death toll rivaled them. The silence surrounding it shows how history is shaped not only by events, but who chooses to remember. For Americans today, the Bengal famine is more than distant history. It is a warning. It shows how global supply chains, politics, and alliances can determine survival far from the battlefield. It forces us to ask, when nations hoard food or prioritize strategy, who is left to starve? In an age when climate shocks, wars, and blockades threaten food security again, the lessons of 1943 echo loudly. America did not cause the famine, but its silence mattered. 3 million people died not because food did not exist, but because it was not sent. To remember Bengal is to remember that victory in war does not erase the cost of neglect. The famine's ghosts remind us, history is not only about battles won, but about lives lost when indifference triumphs over compassion.